Who's introducing you?
Three.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
You're ready. Hi, everyone. I'm Thuy, and I have the honor to introduce Adriana Abreu. Adriana is an Amazonian environmental anthropologist focusing on resource management, traditional communities, conservation, gender equity, development, and social environmental challenges in Brazilian Amazon. So her research is so diverse. She holds a bachelor degree in social sciences and master degree in sociology and anthropology from University of Pirarucu, Brazil. Is over the past decade, she has been involved in researching social environmental conflicts, development, and resistance of rural communities in Amazonia. As an activist scholar. Adriana was previously a grantee of the Amazon Rainforest Fund, contributing to the journalist collaborative project Quilombolas, marine communities, invisible protectors of the forest inside of COVID-19. That is the title of her project. Currently, she is a PhD candidate in anthropology at Indiana University. Adriana's research focuses on intersection of formal rules and social norms in the Arapana histories. I'm sorry, but I cannot pronounce that. Community-based management. She is a part of the project titled Integrating Gross-Scale Socio-Ecological Feedbacks in Freshwater Histories, co-led by Professor Eduardo Brondizio. And she's also the lab manager of the Center for Analysis of Socio-Ecological Landscape, or CASO, and Ostrom Workshop Fellow this year. So welcome, Adriana, and her presentation.
Thank you, Thuy. It was a very kind introduction. And thank you, everyone. Wow, no pressure. So today I'm going to talk about formal rules and social norms, in this case, gender norms, and the women's participation in the Pirarucu community-based management. It's a long sentence. So I will say Pirarucu CBM or Pirarucu co-management or Pirarucu CBM system. I mean the same. And we go to definitions soon, but I need to give, what's happening here? Oh, okay. But first I need to give context. And the context will last 50 minutes. I hope so. Not more. And the first we need to get to know this beautiful fish that's called Pirarucu. The scientific name is Arapaima gigas. Ana Carla is here, she'll kill me because I always say wrong. But we use the indigenous and local name Pirarucu. And for North Americans here, I put some help on how to pronunciate it.
Thank you.
And build throughout the whole presentation.
Yep.
So Pirarucu means red fish. So pira, fish, urucu, red. Because it has beautiful red scales and can grow up 3 meters and can weigh 200 kilograms. And Pirarucu is also an air-breathing fish. So which means that it comes to the surface each 15 minutes to breathe. And manage it, okay. Okay, and Pirarucu is also very important from the Amazon region. I will say Amazonia, Amazon, so it's the same. And here we have a piece of 1894 of José Veríssimo. That's a very canonical book about the fisheries in the Amazonia. And he says that Pirarucu fishers made 9% of the fisheries in the Amazon that time. So, and then we can see that 100 years after, we have the collapse of these fisheries, right? So I try here to do a very short timeline, very, very, very short. So we had the 60s until the 90s, this intensification of the fisheries on Pirarucu. mainly driven by we start to have motors, so boats with motors fueled by gas, and also the expansions of the industrial fishing that exploited traditional territories around the world. So the pirarucu in the 90s became endangered fish. So the Brazilian government established a set of laws throughout the 90s, but in the 96, it banned the fisheries of pirarucu in open waters, just allowing these in CBM Act initiatives, with a given quota allowed by the state and following certain rules. So, and I know that, Professor Ojeda, that in Colombia in 1987, also pirarucu fishers were banned, but they don't have this legislation about CBM, which collapsed the fishers. So this brings us to, okay, to São Raimundo do Jarauá. Yeah. Thank you. It's not working. Yes. So São Raimundo do Jarauá. This was it's a community inside the protected area called Mabirauá Sustainable Development Reserve. That was actually the first sustainable protected area in Brazil. And in 1999, in that community with 20 fishers, started the first initiative of CBM of Pirarucu. And this was possible because, I think I need to be like this to see my slides. And it was just possible because the fishers there had a local knowledge of how to count the pirarucu, because pirarucu comes to the surface to breathe each 20 minutes. So this is a very, very, very important moment that led to this paper of 2004 of the ecologist Leandro Castelo. And also I found a very, very interesting newspaper about tapioca. Tapioca is a fisherman called Jorge, but he prefers tapioca. And he had the knowledge how to count the fish. That Leandro Castelo tested the accuracy, and it was about 9% of accuracy. And then it became, it was adopted by the Brazilian government as a way to count the fish in the lakes. And then they report these numbers of fish to the government, and they are allowed to take up 30% of these. Of course, it's much more complicated, right? So what started there in São Raimundo do Jarauá spread along the Amazon. And today we have more than 6,000 communities managing pirarucu along the Amazon. And also it recovered the stocks in 500% after 25 years. So of course, it's fast forward super much, but Pirarucu managed CBM turned in this multi-level, and multi-actor collective action. And here is like the 2026 kind of like, see the network of partnerships. And of course, this complexify much more. So they have the Coletivo of Pirarucu, that's a collective that try to organize in the regional level the features of Pirarucu. We have a federation. We have a geographic indication seal. We have a brand called Amazonian Taste that try to reach the national and the international markets. So yeah, Pirarucu management is a lot of activities along the way, the year. So they need to protect the lakes, which means surveillance with their own bodies, places that have the absence of state. They need to count the fish. They need to report the numbers of fish, to receive the quota, to prepare and organizing out the group, to fish, and to take it to the market. So it's a lot of activities along the year, and they have just one season to fish that normally goes from July to November. But we need to see the environment, the climate change. Sometimes they have 20 days to take the quota. So I really love this sentence that João Campos Silva says, that Pirarucu is the fish of transformation. And it is the fish of transformation. But of course, it is full of challenges and overlapping challenges. We have the social and governance challenge itself. We have the climate change. We have intense droughts in the Amazon. We have the illegal marketing that's intensified based the absence of the state. We have the middlemen, and we have the price, right? The price, if we translate to dollars, it was $1 20 years ago, and still $1. But the costs of this is probably much more. And we have, I think Professor Eduardo is working on a paper about the price. So we have a lot of research now looking at the Pirarucu CBM to try to understand these layers of complexity. And many people from there, and one of these initiatives to understand is this project here that's led by Professor Eduardo Brandizio and Professor Leandro Castello and other ones, and it's calling Integrating Cross-Scale Socio-Ecological Feedbacks in Freshwater Fisheries. I don't see this very often. We say sociology of Pirarucu. It's easier. And I'm lucky to be part of, actually, this was brought me here to the PhD. So in this project, we have an interdisciplinary team of ecologists, anthropologists, ecologists, hydrologists, and so on. And itself, it's a problem of collective action, right? Very productive, very complex, sometimes hard, but we are trying to integrate. And our focus is to understand the factors and the conditions that make Pirarucu CBM effective for the communities, for the fish itself, for the ecosystem, which is beautifully represented by a diagram made by Emma Hunting. She's a PhD student in Virginia Tech, also part of the project. So we look from the hydrology until the identity of the fishers. And this is a picture of 2 months ago, I guess, that we are trying to see the social and the ecological factors impacting fish abundance in the lakes, which is very challenging. It took us 3 days to have a rough draft of this. So in 2023, we did a huge and intense field work. So we did 3 months of field work. We visited 46 communities, 11 field fishing accord or CBM systems inside 3 protected areas and also surround 3 protected areas. And we have many PhD students involved in this. We had Caetano Franco, that's a PhD student in Virginia Tech. He led the individual interviews, and we had 457 interviews. I myself did 71, not so much, institutional community interviews, which brought me 140 hours to transcribe, and we took 1 year at least, and it was painful, but it's actually better. And we have Priscilla Cunha also working with food insecurity interview. She did 220, and she also now in the field doing a participatory mapping, and she also leading the connectivity. So she's like the bridge between us. So in this project, I am, alongside Professor Brandizio, responsible to watch here. So we are watching, trying to understand the rule compliance in the community level, how it's affected by the regional aspects, as well to understand the community characteristics involved in the CBM, the characteristics of the CBM systems itself, and also the diversity of institutional arrangement within these systems, right? So we have some target papers here. So we have the overall community context that we want to provide and to understand what's the context. We also have the design principles paper that we want to understand what's the relationship of governance configuration and ecological and social outcomes. And from here, we are using, of course, Ostrom design principles because our survey was designed based on these principles. And we needed to adapt to this, and we are discussing this, and I hope that I will finish soon. This paper, Professor Brandizio also has a paper to discuss polycentric governance and CBM. And then we have the gender paper. And here we finish the context. Exactly 50 minutes. Thank you. So
Get a round of applause already.
fainted. So, okay, let's move. So in this specific paper here, we want to understand whether the women's participation in Pirarucu CBM has been changed over time. If so, how? And how have there been changes in gender norms? And most important, do formal rules about women's participation, like written rules, translate to community social norms or are shaped by these? But again, I'm sorry, parenthesis, why this is important, right? And small-scale fishers support livelihood and jobs directly and indirectly of almost 500 million people around the world. And they are responsible for producing almost 37 million tons of food a year. And 45% are women. But okay, here we can say that this is much more. The women in this chain is 5 times more. But we don't see because the gender norms. And it's worth to say what's gender norms, right? So I'm here defining gender norms as referring to informal rules, shared social expectations, and the stereotypes that impose constraints and burdens or expected roles, behaviors, spaces, and responsibilities based on gender that are socially negotiated and, of course, contextually dependent. And we know this, right? They also burn us, especially women. But why gender norms matters? So to achieve sustainability, we just achieve if you're also achieving gender equality. And this is outlined in the Sustainable Development Goal 5 of UN. We also must consider and challenge the constraints and burden of expected roles, behaviors, and expectations based on gender, right? And first and foremost, we need to address deeply rotated social norms that structure inequalities. And we are in very, very important moments that we have seen dismantling these policies that foster equality, right? So we need to pay attention. And to fight back, we need to understand how this works. So we are interested in this, to understand how is the interplay of formal rules or policies and written rules and gender norms. And this is also inspired by, and this is, I will close my parentheses, by the work of Professor Adriana Abreu. I have the honor to be her advisee in my BA and my MA, and she was one of the first scholars in the Brazilian Amazon to systematically, since the 80s, to research fisher women's roles. And until today, she probably is in the field work now. And she was the first ones to say that we are not seeing women in the fisheries because we have the gender inequality lens, because we are just seeing one part of this process. And we'll talk more about this. Okay, methods. And this, I would love your help. So I'm like looking to the data from the institutional survey, right? And that we applied. Also, I did open interviews with fisher women and kind of like getting together all the women that are involved in the CBM systems to talk about these. I have my ethnographic observations. I did my first research in São Raimundo do Jaroá community in 2012 on gender roles. So kind of like, it's also not longitudinal, but in certain ways it is. I have also data coming from Caetano's Franco survey that he applied with individual fishers. I also have data coming from Priscilla about the compositions of each system. And we have also document analysis of regulations, bylaws, and so on. So the approach has pros and cons, of course, limitations. And we have working in the qualitative side and try to work also in the quantitative side. So here We are working with the open interviews and everything more, also the secondary data and also the historical data, but also we are scoring. So trying to score the level of participation of the women or the fisher women or the fishers, right? In these CBMs. So which comes to this table that I am defining the criteria and defining the levels, scores, 1 to 3. So it's like regarding the rights to participate in the associations, the rights to be member, the rights to participate in the activities. We have a series of activities along the year, and the rights to receive income from this participation. Because we have a written rules that says that women can just get half of what the men gets. So, and then I have and this, of course, I still in the process of doing. So I am scoring the CBM systems, which looks like this, and then looking into the written norms of these. And what we see here so far, it's the fishing accords, the CBM systems that have some kind of mention about gender in their bylaws are the ones that have a greater participation of women. And of course, numbers does translate in gender norms or social norms, right? So we also pairing these with ethnographic work and all the open interviews. And also here, I didn't bring this, but I mapped the history of CBM of Pirarucu through CIS framework, that's the Institutional Analysis Development Framework, and the Social Ecological Systems Framework, to try to break this down in phases and look this data into these phases. But still going on. So here I would love to say some preliminary results and also historical understandings about what gender norms in features looks like, and also in Pirarucu management, right? So Pirarucu is this huge, beautiful fish. So we have this image over and over and over and over of this strong man, very skilled, taking the fish from the water with these bare hands, right? And it's a beautiful picture, of course. And it's a very demanding activity, but it's portraying the fisherman as the only actor of this. And it's a very beautiful picture, I know, but it's also part of the story, right? And it's a collective also featured. And the gender norms related to women, these stereotypes, is that the women are just the helpers. They are doing just, what's the word? Supportive roles. Cleaning, cooking, doing 50% of the work or maybe 90% of the work, but still helpers, still not paid, still not recognized. But what we have seen this is changes. And here I want to talk about 4 big changes in these 25 years of Pirarucu CBM. And the first one is that the formalizations of the systems. So you have a complexifications and multi-scale, but also a formalization, right? Has been leading to a more visibilization, or the actors involved in the pre-harvesting and the harvesting and the post-harvesting are being visible, are being recognized, are being paid. So you have seen much more women because they are more in the pre and the post. So, and of course, a collective, you can carry, Pirarucu is huge, but also we are not carrying by one feature. We also, this is very important. This I found actually yesterday. I met Dona Raimunda last year in the field, and she was the first woman to be certificated as a Pirarucu counter. So she's skilled, habilitated to count the Pirarucu in the lakes. And this is it's very important part of the process. And it's one of the activities, if you don't participate, you don't get paid. So she was the first one to be recognized. And also we have been seeing this the most visibility of women, of fisher women, and like the women now start to be seen as an equal actor in the system and have the same designation. So here is Dona Milce Rodrigues. She's the first fisherwoman president of Pirarucu CBM. And that was when she received the role there last year, or 2 years ago, actually. And what we saw that before, the language was marking fishermen. And in Portuguese, it's very hard because it's a very gender language, right? So the table is she, the book is here. So it's very hard to go out of this. But we just saw fishermen in the rules and everything. Now we see the change. So we are marking the both genders, fisherwomen, fishermen, pescador, pescadora. And also we saw the rise of the manager identity that I know that doesn't make sense in English. It's like managers. But they saw manejador and manejadora, and all the flyers, all the policies today have the mark of two genders. So language also translates a lot of how the ideas are being shaped. So this change in language show us how these have been changing. So they're also reclaiming and taking leadership roles. And I lost myself in my notes. So we saw each time more women taking leadership roles. And when I was there in São Raimundo de Arauá, 2013 maybe, the women are saying we cannot be presidents because our husbands are too jealous. But now we see each time more, and we see also movements and resistance and fights. So we have here Dona Milce receiving a prize to the best CBM system, like the best performance in the year, 2 years ago. We have Dona Maria here, that's always in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, in the fishers meetings. So we see each time more. And this is also fostered by their creating their own spaces and organizations. And here I bring 3 examples, and we have tons of them. But I really like these ones. Here is a podcast made by the Juruá Institute and brings a lot of fisher women telling their story, how they find themselves fishers through the Pirarucu CBM. Because before they just thought that they are helping. And then it's a very beautiful because they said, no, I am the fisher. I do everything. So I need to be paid. Here is the Adriana Abreu Prize. So that research is naming this prize of the CBM system in this Mamirauá area, that's the Mid-Solimões River, that have a greater participation of women. And not just quantitatively, but also how they are performing, how they are being paid. And this, I think, is already 5 years. And here we have, in 2024, the first meeting of women managing Pirarucu. And the title is very, very representative of this change that we're seeing. It's like strengthening identities and networks. And we are in this phase. So just to conclude, big changes are made by constant small changes in the everyday life. So we do see interconnectedness between changes in formal rules and shifts in gender norms. Why this transformation are not at the same pace? We do have a shared sense of improvement. And the institutional arrangements of Pirarucu, and Dona Milce is here, carry on, not only has been promoting the ecological sustainability, recovering this fish 500% in the lakes, but also committed to foster social equality and inclusivity. So the next steps maybe would be finished to write. I promised my committee, Diana here and Rondidio here, that I would have a good draft of this soon this month. And also start to put the data together. And I'm planning to do a participatory field work, workshop in the summer to bring these fishermen together, to show the data and to reflect about the challenge, the lessons, the sense of improvement, how we are seeing, also bring the researchers that have been doing this much more time than I. And yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so now we're open for questions and answer, and as you have your committee here, they will have a question that you cannot handle. Well, a question from students first.
Thank you. This is awesome. I'm a big Pirarucu fan. So, my question is I apologize that it's kind of taking us out of your direct research and back into the context, but I'm really interested in the idea that there's a geographic indicator.
Yes.
For this. So could you tell us a little more about that, and also how this, I know that geographic indicators in North America are really hard to establish. And there's an entire codified system in Europe, but I'm really interested in how this manages to get done in Brazil.
That's a very good question that I don't have much to say. Otherwise, that they have creating this network, the regional level, with a lot of partners, also international partners funding this initiative, so they could get. I don't know how it's going on, Professor Brangiso, maybe you can help me here. Call this indication seal, but they are trying to reach other markets, so they have the seal already. And that's very funny because they are bringing international chefs and national chefs, like, come here. Yeah. How we do Pirarucu, how we treat Pirarucu, but I don't know how is the process. Do you know?
To get the certification.
Yeah, or how that manages to be codified in Brazil. Is there a larger system of geographic indicators
There's
there?
a national system of indication. It has been a strategy that many communities in the Amazon have been using for manioc flour, for acai, for and it was intended to do with two things. One is that the illegal market is huge. It's one way that you can create, some kind of seal or transparency that, sort of try to, become the illegal market. The other thing is that, as Adriana said, for 20 years, the price has been stagnated. So what they've been trying to do in the last 5 years to open these new markets in southern Brazil by training chefs, by creating a taste for the fish, which is not common in other parts of Brazil. So this becomes a way of adding that value, that the fish is coming from communities that are managing it. And so it's a way of communication with other parts of the country, try to get better value for something.
No, and the illegal marketing is a huge problem. So we don't have enforcement of the state, right? The state are in the capitals. We have, like, since 2014, maybe this dismantling of the environment, the enforcement of the state. The state left, and the fishers are by themselves there, right?
Yeah, I mean, GIs are often sold as a way to do like cultural conservation, but I love how this is doing environmental conservation.
Fantastic. Me too. Thank you.
You're getting lots of notes of celebration and well done online. Just so
Thank
you know.
you.
So I'll copy the chat for you. No questions so far. Yeah.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your work. This is not necessarily related to the questions you're trying to ask. Well, they are, I think. But the story that you're telling is generally a positive story, right? That you're seeing these advancements in representation, in occupying spaces, in leadership, and storytelling. I wonder if, what are the burdens that are being carried to achieve these positive stories, right? Achieve these spaces, because oftentimes we know that women do achieve leadership roles, but they have to still carry the jobs of social reproduction, right? They're not paid home jobs. So they continue to carry those So they're just adding, right, to their workload. And so I was just wondering if you had any insight on that, like what are the burdens that are getting bigger or being carried to achieve those gains?
No, you're totally right. And this double, triple burdens, right? And I think yes, there are a lot of also requirements to participate, but I think in this case they were already doing all these jobs. They are doing all the activities. They are cleaning the fish. So the fisherman goes to the lake, takes the fish, but the fish is like being treated by the women that were never paid. So I think in this case, is to visibilize actors that were already there all the time. And were already there doing the work, but now being paid, now being recognized, and having the right to participate. And this is, of course, and I think that's something that I didn't talk here, but there is these connections and layers of institutions, right? So it's like communities inside protected areas with a network of support. So when you go to other areas, and we did this actually, so this area here, it's a lot of slides to come back. But we did some areas that are surrounding protected areas. And it's a very different context. It's a very, very, very different context. So also this institutional network is affecting, right? So you see our Paraná area, that's a federal protected area, I guess. I arrived in the communities and they say like, even don't start. Even don't start to talk about this. The women are not participating. And then when you bring these, they say, oh, wait, but who's doing this part good? The women, but they don't get nothing. And I heard many stories that when they tried to pay the women's work, the community got together and said, no, it's not happening. So I think this experience is much more about paying people, like actors that are already doing this work. So just visualize. But you're right. This is double burden and everything. And they do have, right? It's the house, is to work in the CBM activities, the kids, it's everything. So it's already like this burden. I think now just being recognized.
Well, I wonder if that changes, like if perceptions like from men, for example, are changing in terms of.
It is.
I don't know if you interviewed men.
I did. And this is a very, very interesting dynamic that in this region here, that's also the region that started the Pirarucu CBM. So here we have the CBM systems with a greater participation with women. We have one in specific that Honson is here in the Zoom and he works with this, that they have the rule that the women cannot participate. And then they always say in meetings, they say, don't start. Yeah, we know, we are old on this. So they have a lot of institutional pressure, right? So one fisherman said like, well, we got this warning that they will take our CBM if you don't involve the women. So of course, depends of the institutional arrangements that they have more pressure. If you have like space that we don't have this, as like out Paraná, these networks and these institutions that are have like fostering policies. And as we have as far, BIA works with these international agreements. But we think the Sustainable Development Goal, this will fund also initiatives on the ground, right? So it goes there in some ways, not in the same path, not in the same intensity. So if you have this lack of overlap institutions, also it's more complicated. Thank you.
My question was related, but I can go. Okay, so my question was related to Patricia. That's why I joined. Because the other consequence of this increased women's participation that I've seen in similar contexts is increased levels of gender-based violence. So you have to police the fact that women are transgressing these expectations, rules, stereotypes in a way that translates into not only more work, but also violence. So I was curious if you were able to get a sense of that. That is very hard, that is not what people start talking to you about, but that is one question I had. And then I have, some big picture comments, and I won't take too long because we will have more opportunity to talk about that. But one that I wanted to point is how state absence is really not that the state is, it's not a state omission. It's a way of a state formation that is very important to understand in itself. So it's not lack of a state or omission of actions. It is, an active decision that needs to be understood. Same with the difference between legal and illegal markets. I have a lot of problem with this because the boundary is very difficult to establish. And of course, I'm thinking with Colombia, and maybe Brazil is different, but in Colombia, the legal, illegal, like for what? For gold, for Pirarucu, for whatever, like you cannot establish that relationship. One that Patricia already mentioned, and is the economic production versus the social reproduction thing to think about, because that is what is being also is transforming. And then one last one, and I will stop, is how I think an element that is part of the bigger picture is how communities, local communities in this region of the Amazon are made responsible to bring back a fish that they were really not the ones getting rid of. Like, of course, we can argue that they're the usual suspects and they work as perfect scapegoats. Everywhere in my own ethnographic work with fishers, they're usually blamed for any disruption in the environment, and they are made responsible for fixing it, but they didn't cause it. Like, this is part of process of industrialization, of deforestation, of climate change, as you mentioned. So those things are for later. You don't have to answer now, but things that I wanted to mention as you continue writing and we keep in conversation. I feel so lucky to, be in conversation with you. I always learn so much.
Thank you, Diana. Oh my goodness. Before Diana comes here, I sent a message to her, and Professor Brown just said, Diana is coming to work. And I was like, yeah, she needs to be in my community. Thank you. And
with committee.
yeah. And yes, your points are super right. So about domestic violence, I don't have data about these. I know that there are folks that are working. Adriana Abreu, she also works on these. What I have is like memories from like 13 years ago that one of like this husband being jealous was actually violence, domestic violence, right? And I would say that now we have much more institutional. It's like pressure comes to all the sides, right? So I think also the participation it's more accepted, and in this area here is very highly recognized. So now in this area of here, the CBMs are kind of competing who has a greater participation of women, but this is a very specific dynamic of this, right? And about the legal, illegal market, of course, it's a discussion what's illegal, right? So I think we had this cuidado, this care in the fieldwork when we were talking about illegal, to not talk about this word illegal, but what's illegal, right? But we do have, and this we're talking in the community level, right? But we do have this illegal marketing that are using the Pirarucu fishers and using the Pirarucu transportation to put drugs and all those things. And we have a very emblematic case, I think 3 years ago. And that one journalist, American journalist, and indigenous, he was working with indigenous people. They were murdered in Bruno and Don Phillips. They were murdered, and they were intervening communities that starting Pirarucu CBM in another area, not in this area, and they are like hiding drugs inside the fish. So we also have these, right? And it's very connected with this what said about this state absence. And also we had like the state start to go away, like in the Bolsonaro area, and then it didn't come back. It's still here. We still with another government, another goals and everything. The state's still not there. So of course it's designed by this, right? And about the economic and non-economic, and I think Edna is working really on these. Adriana always say, if you look to this economic view of the fishers, you're not seeing the women's work because it's to support the everyday life, right? Yeah, and I do think I have maybe a very positivist way to see, not positivist, not the epistemology, but a good way to see this Pirarucu management as one of the times that the Amazonian people are shaping how sustainability looks like. Of course, they are not for causing. They didn't cause the reduction of Pirarucu stocks, but they are showing how we protect, how we do. So I try to look in this lens.
We do have one online at some point as well that we can just kind of loop in, but no, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. I mean, you're basically sitting on a big mine of, data, information. And, gender is one question, but I was also, thinking about just the mere size of the success of this, enterprise, that like 500% increase. And that made me think of your insistence on indigenous knowledges that you were earlier telling, that, what they brought in was the method of counting, and that helped shape the policies in so many ways, and also knowledge. And then, kind of thinking about indigenous knowledges and imagining sustainability. But at the same time, also thinking about connections with the global market, right? So how, on the one hand, there's an economic advantage, right? An economic advantage which is generally considered limitless. You can make as much profit out of it, connecting with the global market and with the local market. On the other hand, this relationship with this fish. And so and they kind of interestingly map onto this global kind of scientific knowledge of free market, or positivist knowledge of free market driven by profit. But here, like at the local level, it is shaped by, everyday practices, and actually a very intimate relationship with the fish itself, right? So I was just wondering, like, how people at the local level kind of navigate these pulls in the opposite directions. On the one hand, market and profits and better, production. On the other hand, this specific desire or this responsibility at the same time of saving this fish and continuing to build this intimate relationship with it, that it survives too. So, and that's where I think there's also kind of an interesting point to navigate the push and pull between indigenous knowledges and embodied knowledges, along with the larger abstract logics of the market.
Thank you, Ajas. Thank you so much. I took a class with Ajas in the first year. It was amazing, water and society, and shaped me a lot how I think water until today. Thank you. Yes, I think the profit is something that is not coming, right? So they are not making come from this. We have much others contributions, and we're trying to understand, but they are paying to be in the system. So if they are receiving $1, they are paying $2 to be in the system. So there's no profit. So I think, and when I see this mobilization to try to reach the market, and the national market that we know how complicated it is, right? But to reach these markets to get some profit of these. But it's also very limited. They have just up to 30% of they can take just a 30%. And there are many experiences that they are not fishing every year. They say, okay, we are taking just each 2 years, but because it's better for the lakes, it's better for the fish. So you have this kind of relationship with the fish. But one thing that we see is that they want to be part of the CBM systems, to have a better organization, also to have access to partners, so to have access to benefits. Sometimes like the reason was, okay, we are part, we're organized, and then the institutions, the organizations of outside are looking at us, and it's easier to get retirement benefits. But we are also talking about river increments that have, so we also want to see the characteristics of the communes. So how far away they are from the cities, right? So how much access they have from water, electricity, and it's very low access. So the work in the CBM is not translating in money. Actually, they are paying for. So I don't know if I answer your question, but there is a certain kind of relation. I think now to reach the markets is a strategy to keep doing, because it's so costly that's not sustaining. And we ask how this is sustaining, right? And this is sustaining because the relationship of the fish, because they are also protecting, Pirarucu is top of chain, right? So if you protect the Pirarucu, you are protecting all the species that are under this, right? So they can fish other species and get more money with this than with Pirarucu. I think that answers all.
Interesting. Again, the extra economic.
Yes. Yes.
I can jump in with Della's comment if you'd like to.
Yes.
So Della is saying, wonderful talk. Of course, we all agree. The human adaptation researchers have argued that women are fishers among the EMA, Wiggins, and elsewhere because they're better diverse and more cold tolerant. Do Pirarucu fishers claim sex differences as positive attributes?
Okay, I'm just fishes have a good fishes. Okay. Wow, Professor Cook, thank you so much for your question. I think these claims, when they come, they are based on gender norms that are very biased, that trying to connect women to nature, right? And like this weird idea that we have this separation of nature and culture. So I see some use of this idea that they are better cares and everything, but this is also based on these very stereotyped gender norms and stereotypes of the women that work are doing or not. So I think I did some interviews that the men wanted like to do this. Oh, but they are caring, they are the best care. So they are cleaning this Pirarucu and cleaning our clothes. So, and then we see, wow, very, very strict gender norms here. So, but I don't know if I answer your question good, actually.
I'll send you some references, but I think the science is perhaps biased too.
Yes.
And it interests me that circumstances like this one develop these naturalization kinds of metaphors. And I would be very curious about whether you're collecting information of that kind.
No, you're super right, Professor. And that was one of the claims that Adriana Abreu did in her thesis, the master thesis, about like many researchers that they replied 10 years ago. And it was a huge like discussion among the Amazonian anthropology that she was saying, wait. Also, the researchers are not seen because they are biased, right? But you told about cold tolerance. Could you clarify the fish itself? Then we can talk more.
Yeah, my guess is deficient.
Yes. Yes. I think so. Yeah.
I think it's about the fisher.
Yes.
Me too.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just afraid of it, of how bad that has gone in the past.
Oh, we have one more, Olivia, if we.
Oh, no.
Chat.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
Adriana,
Oh, yes, please. Yeah.
you touched a bit on people's reaction to the research. I would like to hear more about your reflections regarding how having the research going on in the territory instigates new ways of thinking about it and how people react to the results. Yeah, Livia, thank you for the question. I think I might be just showing and representing what people are on the ground, on the communities, talking about this, and also how the fisher women are perceiving themselves and the sense of improvement, also a sense of being part of these systems. And I think after like many years working with these communities, so I start my research life in general community when I was just 1 year in my BA. And so I have connections, right? Friendships and everything. So I'm being much more clear and really in a meeting with 30 fishers, just say like how it's going on here. You know, it's like what's happening. And we have like very, very, very honest conversations about how it's happening, right? And how these things goes. Maybe I think I have more reactions outside but there and to understand how it's going and some like reinforcement of these gender norms. But yeah, I think I feel more comfortable maybe talk with them because it's not talking, right? It's like just learning and like, okay, yeah, it makes sense. It's like connected with this. So yeah. So yep.
So it's like, maybe because I missed it and you explained it before, it's, so you said that for each dollar that they receive, so for each dollar that they get through some kind of market, they receive 2. So who is paying the difference?
No. I don't know what happened here. No, they spend 2.
Oh, they spend 2. And they are paying the difference out of their pocket.
Yeah, so I will ask what's the contributions? Why are you still in this kind of system? Of course, because there are other contributions to be organized, to have access to service. I'm like roughly put numbers here. The paper of Professor Brondisi will be more accurate.
I think it's time. So again, congratulations.
Thank you.
That was terrific.
Thank you
Judge.
so much.
No, you nailed it. Now we get to continue the good times.
So
On your defense.
thank you. Oh my goodness.
Exactly.
You'll be super soon. And thank you everyone online. Now we are turning to the celebration of Professor Adriana Abreu.